Um, is the video on or is it, hey. Hey guys, I know you probably didn't expect to see me, but, Dr. Hendricks asked me to do a presentation on my favorite term. So, I put something together for you guys, and I hope you like it, and I hope you learned something too. Yeah, I think we should just get into it. I'm actually really excited to show this to you. But yeah, let's just dive right into it. I shared the presentation with you guys, so if you guys can just click on that, and yeah, we'll get started. Okay, great. So I see you guys have opened the presentation. It's just gonna be, I'm just gonna explain the attitude turn, explain a little bit about it, and go through the phases. Before I get into the specifics, let me just give you a quick rundown on basically what I'm going to be talking about. So the turn that I will be discussing in this presentation will be a right side attitude turn. To begin this turn, you must step on the left leg and bend both legs. The right leg will lift up into a back attitude as the left leg remains in a plie on the left foot and stays relatively flat on the ground. The arms will swing to allow the torso to get to about 45-degree flat back position, and this is all happening during a 360 turn. All right, y'all, I gotta get going because I'm a yapper at heart, and Dr. Hentis only wants us to be 10 minutes, so let's get to it. Starting on the left leg in the prep phase, beginning in anatomical position, the left foot will slide to the side in an Alice tendu, and from there will abduct at the femoral acetabular joint, and this will enable an open chain position. While in this position, the gluteus maximus is causing the femoral acetabular to be in extension as well. As the midfoot and the forefoot begin to flex, the talocrural joint begins by moving concentrically in plantar flexion. The interphalangeal joints should stay in extension from the neutral position, and the metatarsophalangeal joints should also be in flexion during this time. There are primary movers in this action, and it is the gastrocnemius and the soleus in the calf, which contract concentrically. Meanwhile, the stabilizers are the posterior tibialis, flexor hallucis, and the flexor digitorum longus. The foot is able to achieve plantar flexion concentrically due to the FHL, FDL, and foot intrinsics. Also, to prevent excessive pronation, the posterior tibialis, FHL, and FDL come into play, whereas to prevent excessive supination, the fibularis longus comes into play. To support the arch, the foot intrinsics will help with that. And there's more. So as the dancer transfers their weight onto the left foot, the FHL, FDL, and the foot intrinsics work together to whirl inferiorly through the foot and bring the left foot back into the closed chain position. Dorsiflexion that occurs eccentrically is possible due to the anterior tibialis and extensor hallucis longus. When the left foot joins the right leg in the plie, the tibial femoral joint and the talocrural joint also go into a closed chain dorsiflexion. When it is in a closed chain position, this means that the tibia and the fibula glide on the talus during dorsiflexion, and the talus glides posteriorly, causing the joint to become tighter and more stable. When the knee is in extension, the primary movers are the quadricep femoris. When the knee goes into flexion, the gluteus maximus works to help with the slight flexion and abduction at the femoral acetabular joint. During this, the midfoot and the forefoot are actually in relative extension. As for the right leg flexes both at the tibiofemoral joint and the talocrural joint during the plie. This means the forefoot and the midfoot are in relative extension. In a closed chain position, the right foot will stay in place until the calcaneus reaches the floor. Similar to the left leg, while the knee is in extension, the primary movers remain the same. Quadricep femoris as the knee goes into flexion. The gluteus minimus is put into work as the hip goes into slight flexion. As for the trunk, when beginning this turn, the thoracic spine will move in the transverse plane and obtain some rotation towards the left side of the body. To gather this rotation, the erector spinae and multififidus are working to rotate the spine. Transverse abdominis and multififidus would co-contract for spinal stability. The external oblique on either side, left and right, will contract to help with stabilization. The slight flat back position is created by anterior pelvic tilt and tilting the entire trunk anteriorly. At the glenohumeral joints, the right arm will cross over the left, horizontal abduction, flexing, and internal rotating will occur. The radius will glide medially over the ulna on both arms during the protraction of the arms. The arm position will be rounded and slightly flexed at the elbow joint. The primary movers will be the deltoid and the pectoralis major during internal rotation and horizontal adduction. There will be slight radial deviation and extension at the radiocarpal joints on both hands. Scapulas will abduct, and protract with slight upward rotation. Lastly, the bicep branchiae are primary movers for the arms and contract concentrically. In the initial takeoff phase, the left leg, there will be a continuation of flexion at the femoral acetabular joint, and this would be caused by the gluteus minimus. Furthermore, the gluteus maximus and bicep femoris will aid with more external rotation at the femoral acetabular and tibiofemoral joint. As for the right leg, we don't want any crunching of the toes, and we want the line to look as extended as possible. So the metatarsophalangeal joints in flexion and the interphalangeal joints will remain in extension. Concentrically, the forefoot and midfoot will go into flexion as the foot goes into plantar flexion at the talar crural joint. The toes are able to enter plantar flexion concentrically because of the FHL, FDL, and foot intrinsics. The gastrocnemius and soleus in the calf still remain the primary movers and will contract concentrically, and the stabilizers will remain as the posterior tibialis, flexor hallucis longus, and flexor digitorum longus. The right foot will press from a closed chain dorsiflexion position in plie to a plantar flex position as the femoral acetabular joint is in hyperextension. For the arms, the glenohumeral joints on either arm will horizontally adduct, internally rotate, and isometrically flex. The arms will remain rounded, so there will be a small flex in the elbow joint. The radius will glide medially over the ulna as the arms are protracting, and this will occur in both arms. The horizontal adduction, internal rotation, isometric contraction means that the primary movers will be the deltoids and the pectoralis. As the radiocarpal joints, there will be a little bit of radial deviation as well as extension in both hands. For the scapulas, they will have a slight rotation upwards as well as they will be abducted and protracted. The bicep branchiae will be isometrically contracted. Now, wrapping up this phase, for spinal stability, the multififidus and the transverse abdominis will co-contract. For more stabilization, the left and right external oblique will come into play. The flat back position will remain by the anterior pelvic tilt and the trunk slightly tilted forward anteriorly. All right, let's talk about this left leg during the turn. Eccentric flexion will remain in the knee, and the quadriceps are the primary movers. As the torso dips forward, the flexion within the femoral acetabular joint will deepen. The external rotation will stay in the tibiofemoral joint and the femoral acetabular joint, and the gluteus maximus will be working in isometric contraction as well as the bicep femoris. For patella tracking, the quadriceps femoris is contracting. And again, to prevent excessive pronation, the posterior tibialis, FHL, and FDL come into play, whereas to prevent excessive supination, the fibularis longus comes into play, and to support the arch, the foot intrinsics will help with that. Since the right leg is now actively lifting, it will be in an open chase position, and now the muscles are contracting concentrically. Extension and external rotation will occur at the femoral acetabular joint, and the tibiofemoral joint will flex. The bicep femoris of the hamstring will aid with these actions. The primary movers remain the gastrocnemius and the soleus, but they contract isometrically. And the stabilizers are posterior tibialis, FHL, and FDL. Isometrically, the talar crural joint, the forefoot, and the midfoot will be in flexion, and this will happen as the foot stays in plantar flexion. Metatarsophalangeal joints in flexion as well. Interphalangeal joints should remain in extension to help elongate the line. The primary movers of the arms are the tricep branchiae. Extending and horizontally adducting, the glenohumeral joints in the right arm will uncross from the left side. In the transverse plane, the elbow joints are extended. The radius will continue to glide medially over the ulna on either arm because the arms will remain in protraction. In both the radiocarpal joints, one in each hand, there will be slight radial deviation and also extension. Again, in a slight upward rotation, the scapulas will adduct and retract. For spinal stability, the multififidus and the transverse abdominis will co-contract. For more stabilization, the right and the left oblique will contract. The flat back position will remain by the anterior pelvic tilt and the trunk tilted a little bit anteriorly. All right, you guys, don't doze off on me. We're almost done. Just one more phase to go. More of the patella tracking will occur as the tricep femoris is actively contracting. The knee will stay in eccentric flexion and the quads are the primary movers. In an isometric contraction, the gluteus maximus and the bicep femoris will work together. Also, external rotation will stay at the femoroacetabular and tibiofemoral joint. Furthermore, similar to the other phases, the foot intrinsics will support the arch, and the posterior tibialis, FHL, and FDL will help with excessive pronation, whereas the fibularis longus will help to prevent excessive supination. As the tibiofemoral joint extends eccentrically and stays in external rotation, the gluteus maximus are the primary movers. The foot will now move into dorsiflexion, a closed chain position. As the interphalangeal joints, they will go into extension and the right phalanges will be grounded. Then the metatarsal joints, forefoot and midfoot, will go into relative extension. To help bring the interphalangeal joints and the metatarsal joints to relative extension, the FDL, FHL, and foot intrinsics work eccentrically. To help with eccentric dorsiflexion, the anterior tibialis and the extender hallucis longus, EHL, come into play. The calcaneus now reaches the floor. Now the scapulas are rotated downward. There is relative ulnar deviation at the radiocarpal joints. As the radius rotates laterally over the ulna, supination of the radioulna must occur, and this will help to go into more of a neutral position, and both arms will adduct at the glenohumeral joint. All right, guys, here's the home stretch. The torso will start to lift posteriorly from relative flat back position by the rectus abdominis contracting. The whole torso will obtain a posterior tilt and will go into a neutral at the femoral acetabular joint. The internal obliques on either side now work as stabilizers for when the torso is unwinding. For more spinal stability, the transverse abdominis and the multififidus co-contract. Looks like no one's on the video chat anymore. No worries. That was my little presentation. And I'm gonna screen record this, so I'll post it so everyone can review it after. So if anyone's watching this, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit. And yeah, happy learning.